I get asked all the time, "Oh, are you?" They'll see the name on the hard hat, and I'm like, "Yep."
This is the Wildfire Lessons Podcast. Our goal is to promote learning by revealing the complexity and risk in the wildland fire environment. We share the lessons. The learning that follows is up to you. Hi, I'm Kelly Woods, Director of the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. On today's podcast, I visit with two generations of firefighters, mother and daughter duo Beth and Allison Lund. Beth is the Assistant Director of Operations for the U.S. Forest Service stationed at the National Interagency Fire Center in Boise, Idaho. Beth has been in the wildland fire business for 46 years. I don't think I need to say that is a long time. In her current position, Beth represents the Forest Service in high-level discussions and shapes policies with groups like the National Multi-Agency Coordinating Group, or NMAC, and the Federal Fire Management Board. She has incredible depth in her work history to support her decision-making. Allison Lund enters her 19th fire season this year as she transitions into a new position as a fire operations specialist on the Payette National Forest in Idaho. Allison is also building incredible depth as she crafts her career in a completely different era than the one her mom knew. Beth and Allison were gracious enough to sit down and share their stories centered around family and what matters most. My hope is that you glean some lessons about juggling life and work.
All right. I'm truly honored to be sitting down today with the legendary Beth Lund and her daughter Allison, who is definitely a legend in the making. So super exciting for me. We ask you guys to come here and visit with us a little bit about the dynamics between being a parent and a child, mother and daughter in the wildland fire culture and community. And you guys have a really cool, unique perspective. So absolutely appreciate you sitting down with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. Yeah, you bet. Just to get us started, let's have you take a couple minutes to just kind of talk about where you started in fire and some of the stops along the way, just to kind of orient people what your current position is. Beth, let's start with you since you've got 46 years.
Yeah, so I started working for the Forest Service in 1976 in Northern California. And it was on the Lassen National Forest, and started out as on an engine crew, and then, did a variety of different things, worked on the Lassen for a while, worked out of Redding for a year or so in Northern California on the Redding hotshot crew. And then eventually I went back to and worked on the Mendocino National Forest, also in Northern California. And then at some point I decided to move from California, and so I put in for a job in Idaho. That was about 1983 actually. And so I started on the Boise National Forest in Idaho in 1984 was my first full season. And pretty much stayed in Idaho the rest of the time, and did, worked as an AFMO and then a fire management officer. And then I did a stint down in Utah for a little bit as the deputy fire director in Region 4, the Intermountain region. And then I have my last post here has been in the Washington office at the National Interagency Fire Center. Still working for the Forest Service. I've been pretty much all my life with the Forest Service, haven't gone back and forth. And I'm currently the Assistant Director for Operations for Washington Office Fire and Aviation, posted at NIFC.
That's such an impressive resume. I mean, and not to mention going all the way up to, Type 1 IC and running some pretty awesome crews in the basin. So yeah, awesome resume. And I think it's worth mentioning too, the 80s were epic fire seasons on the Boise, right?
Yeah, you're right. The 80s there were pretty active. Seems like the 90s were a little bit more mellow for the most part, generalizing. But
It's funny. My first memory of you, Beth, I certainly had heard your name. I was working up on the Payette at the time, and I came down to the Great Basin Training Center for what was then called supervision training. You know, it was certainly not the leadership curriculum. It was supervisory 101 or whatever it was. And I remember you were on that cadre, and I remember thinking, that's Beth Lund. Okay. You know, yeah, pretty cool. Allison, tell us how you officially got started in fire.
I started my career right out of high school, got onto a Type 2 crew, and then went to 2 other Type 2 crews after that for 3 seasons on Type 2 crews, and then got with the Boise Hotshots. Was a crew member for a long time, basically did every role on the crew, got to be a squad boss, and then I ended as a captain. Was on the crew for 14 years. And then this last year, I got a job with the regional office as a contract equipment specialist, which learned a lot of cool stuff, and it was definitely a lot different than anything I'd been used to. But with that said, decided to get back into the operations side of things. So I'm currently in the transition of going back to being a fire operations specialist on the Payette National Forest.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a strange transition. I know, Beth, you've done that too, but that transition from operations, being on a crew, hanging out, doing that stuff into this office setting is really, it's a struggle, and I don't know if you're ever quite ready for it, but yeah.
I think that another dynamic part of that was being virtual, going from being on crews for my whole life, basically, to sitting at my house by myself, which is cool to hang out with my dogs and stuff, but yeah. It's odd. Yeah, that's for sure.
It's definitely, the pandemic's definitely added for 2 years now, added a extra layer of, I don't know what to call it, a different way to exist in the workplace, I guess, or not in the workplace for the most part.
Yeah.
I think it was a lot harder for people like myself that, you know, have always been in a office setting, and we didn't even know what telework was back in the day. So it's always been my ideal to, you know, be, and it's been really weird the last 2 years, even in our suite at NIFC, just a couple of us at a time there occasionally, and you just really miss the human interaction. Yep.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about what brought you into fire and what that was like for both of you, because, you know, obviously decades apart. And Beth, did you have anyone in your family that was working in fire, or are you first generation?
Yeah, no, I'm first generation. I was actually a city kid. I was raised in the Bay Area, California. And I'd gone to junior college there for a couple years, and met, my first partner, and he and I decided we were going to go up to the junior college. I couldn't afford 4-year college in those days, and so a lot of folks in my generation went to we called them junior colleges or community colleges, and so we went to the Lassen Community College and took forestry. Interesting thing there is, that was in 1976, 74 and 5, I guess, is when I went to college up there. And right out of high school, just like Allison, pretty much. I graduated high school in 73, but they had forestry. And so immediately my partner there decided he was going to take fire. But they had fire and surveying and timber, and there was one other, recreation. And they steered me away from fire, and so
of course.
So I took the recreation venue and 2-year, but I did get an associate's degree, so if nothing else, I at least got a degree out of it.
Better than me.
So how I got my start then was the FMO from the Lassen National Forest came out to do some recruiting at the college. And I believe that was right when the Forest Service was about to deal with the litigation, which became the consent decree. I had no idea at the time, of course, but they were specifically trying to recruit some diversity, primarily females. But nonetheless, they recruited quite a few folks, and so my partner and I both got hired, as well as quite a few other folks, or invited to come out. And anyway, they hired us as GS. I actually started as a GS3 because I did have a couple years years of college, so that was helpful.
That's big money.
That was big money. Yeah, so that's how I got my start. I don't want to go too much further, but I started on an engine on the Lassen National Forest in Chester, California, which is kind of a cool little town. So
cool. Do you remember your parents having a reaction like, you're doing what? Or
yeah, my mom was she was like, what? She was raised on a farm, so she was definitely had an outdoor sense about her, but when she realized that I got on a fire crew, but she didn't really like overreact. She was just like, oh goodness, but we were up there by ourselves, so I said it's going to be fine. And so but I kept in touch with her, and I think she worried a little bit, but hard to tell because we were apart, and all we had was the phone at that point in time. So
yeah,
it's not like you could get on a Skype or anything, see reactions. But
yeah. Allison, how about you? I mean, obviously you were raised around fire culture. You had, as your mom progressed there in Lowman and Garden Valley, I mean, you probably knew everyone who worked there, all the things. It was very much, you had fire on the landscape all the time around you. So growing up in that culture versus not growing up in that culture, when did you kind of think, maybe I'll give this a try?
I don't really know that I guess I probably did have some forethought about it, but I kind of really just feel like, it was basically a family community type thing, especially back then when I grew up in Lowman, Idaho. Basically everybody from Lowman was in the Forest Service. And so, we had softball games. It was kind of like a little family. So it was kind of, like you said, all around me. And so I guess it was kind of the easy path for me. I did really well in school and stuff like that. And so I kind of had a decision point where, like, was I going to go to college or, what was I going to do? And so I actually started working at the front desk when I was in, like, middle school in Lowman, greeting visitors and stuff like that. And so I did that. So I was kind of already engaged in the system. And so when I graduated high school, I had some scholarships, academic scholarships, and then actually had a volleyball scholarship to go to Eastern Oregon, but I had injured my shoulder, so I decided against that. And so I did sign up for school. So I just did a short season, my first season, went to school. Never have really been a huge fan of school. And so, I tried it out. I actually did it for, I think, the first year I did a full year. And then the next two, I just did one semester apiece, and my scholarships ran out and I was over it. So that's when I got on the hotshot crew and just kind of went with that. And, it was once again a family to me, and I was, outside, and I'm not a huge people person either. So it was great to, just be in that setting, working hard with a bunch of other people that just want to work hard and be outside. So it just kind of fit me.
Yeah. Would you say you two are personality-wise fairly similar?
Oh, yeah.
So.
Yeah. It was funny. I just thinking about this podcast, knowing we were going to sit down, I did call Dion Berner, the superintendent of the Boise Hotshots, who, of course, worked for you, Beth, for a number of years. And then, Allison, you went on to work for Dion for a number of years. And I thought, and he's a great guy, right? Super great guy. I thought Dion's going to have a fun perspective. And so, first of all, when I said we were going to sit down, he was like, that's so cool. He was like, yeah, that is very cool.
I feel like he was probably like, oh boy.
No, he was excited. And he said, the first thing I can say is Allison is 100% self-made. She has not had anything handed to her. She's proven herself, and she's built her career and her reputation exclusive from the reputation of you, Beth. And I think that's a tribute to you in the way you managed that. And it's a tribute to you, Allison, in the way that you've charted your own course, even in, the shadow, right? You've done it. And I thought that was really cool, the way Dion articulated that. And then he said they are both very direct and, good communicators, like, what they're thinking. They don't beat around the bush. But he said, Beth has been a great mentor to me and to many, many other people. He said it's been amazing, the leadership that she's shown and how she's helped develop people. And he said, Allison is developing into the exact same thing. So I thought it was kind of interesting, to hear him talk about you. Totally cool. I cold called him. He didn't know I didn't say, hey, let's visit. So that was pretty cool. So Beth, at one point it's obvious Allison is going to, venture into the fire world, fire career. What were you thinking? Did you have any concerns?
No, not really. It's like any parent, though. It makes you reflect a little bit more on the job you've been doing for several years. I have to tell one story. When I was an incident commander, I think Type 2, and I can't remember exactly where we were, but we were in the Great Basin somewhere when she was on, I think, a crew out of eastern Idaho. And it was the first time and so she literally avoided me. She did not want to be thought of as being, teacher's pet, as it were, or, I have an in here. So I kind of hunted her down after, because I wasn't going to, and we were busy doing in briefings and stuff, and their crew was getting, had just gotten there. But so in the dark of night out in the parking lot, we met up. And anyway, we just chatted, and I said, oh, it's cool that you're here and stuff. And I think after that, the ice was broken. But I think, I would have probably been similar because neither her or I are extroverts, really. That would be left to her brother.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, But then after that, she would come up, and she didn't ever want to come up like right after the briefing or something. But if she saw me standing by myself or something, if she had time, she'd come over and say hi. Or if she was doing a medical run for the crew or something and had to come, into the camp proper, she'd look me up. So yeah, but it was interesting that first time. She was like, "Oh boy, I don't know if I wanted anybody to know that that's my mom."
I wanted no part of that, actually. It was like you said that Dion mentioned, I didn't want it to be looked at as like I was given anything, and so I just wanted to be to myself, especially when you're in that crew setting and, you're all lined out and walking to chow and stuff. Hey Mom, what's up? No, that's not gonna happen. Yeah. I just wanted to wait until after, and then I probably was kind of an asshole, to my mom, which I kind of felt bad about after, but it's like, no, this is not the time or place. I don't feel comfortable. So we just, met up later on. But yeah, then I started reflecting once I grew up a little bit more, and I was like, well, I guess it's not a huge detriment or whatever. It wasn't a detriment by any means. I'm super proud of my mom, but it was just weird to have her be the boss of everybody.
I have to, if I can, Kelly, have to tell a story about when ththese guys were very young kids, because I always wondered, and I don't even know if I've ever asked Allison if she even remembers anything about it. I'm sure she does, because they were super young, but in 1989, the Loman fire came right through and it barreled right up Highway 21, and I was the AFMO at the time, so I was the initial attack incident commander, or extended anyway. I was a Type 3 IC there, and so they were at home, and we could tell that it was going to come down into town. And so I remember, and again, cell phones weren't really a thing then, well, not in Loman anyway. And so, I can't remember. I believe her dad was at home, but again, I didn't have the means to communicate with him. But long story short, we had to evacuate the town. And so I remember telling everybody I was going to take a minute and go gather my kids up. And this friend of mine who was, kind of, she was just, she was a friend. And
when you live in Loman, Idaho, you make friends with whoever you want. You have limited options.
And so I said, hey, can you can you come? And because my husband was up on the roof, well, not up on the roof, but he was trying to prepare to, the house to, receive fire, and we lived right on the corridor. But anyway, I just remember I have these memories of, Casey was 1, and I think she was 2 or 2.5, and I remember, and there was no seatbelts in my friend's car, and her long-haired boyfriend and stuff. And so I said, "Can you come get my kids? I've called their grandmother from Boise, and she's gonna, that we were evacuating people to the Deadwood campground." And so she said, "Yeah, sure, we'll come get them." And so they came, and I remember throwing my 1-year-old and her in the back seat, no seatbelts, with a diaper bag and a few things. And I had called my mother-in-law. And the next thing I know, I went back and got in my government vehicle, and I saw them at the Haven Lodge. And she said, "Well, we just thought we'd get the kids some ice cream first." And I'm just like, good grief. I go, "You guys need to get out."
Share my sense of urgency, please.
So they did. She did get them down there and found my mother-in-law, because I'm sure there was hordes of people, being evacuated. And so I always wondered if that left an imprint. I don't think my son was old enough to really remember. He was a baby, but
I mean, I don't really know. I can kind of picture stuff, but I don't know if it's from hearing the stories or whatever. But I mean, I kind of feel like I somewhat remember that as being chaotic time. But there was lots of chaotic times when Mom was just gonna, go and work. It was, I don't know, maybe I'm just numb to it. But yeah, that was probably, there's my start to the fire.
There's your indoctrination. Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Casey, your son, and your brother, Allison. What's his reaction when he's together with you two, who are so similar in these similar career paths? And how does he hold his own when it comes to hanging out at the holidays or whatever?
Well, it probably made him a stronger person, because we're both pretty strong people. And so, yeah, I think he dealt with it fine. I don't know if Allison has any reflections.
It's kind of a loaded question. We'd be bleeping stuff out a lot if we went into divulgence on that. But no, we're like the Three Stooges, kind of. We're like you said, me and my mom are very similar, and so we're both kind of his moms. And I mean, she was working a lot too, so I am kind of somewhat of a mom type figure to him as well. And he's definitely a little bit different than us. He's a people pleaser, and he is much more boisterous than we are, and outgoing.
That's funny.
He definitely deals with both of us well, but he definitely refers to us both as crazy. So, yeah, there might be another adjective in there as well. But.
Well, his nickname for me was always Crazy Boots.
That's perfect. That's
because I think he remembers the boots always,
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's funny. Thinking about, in this kind of context, I mean, whether Casey's there or he's not, when you guys are together, do you talk about work much? I mean, is it like, oh, we had this shift, or, wow, this meeting, or, how has that been, or how has that evolved for you in terms of work talk?
Well, I can go first. To me, it was an opportunity to get because I always knew Allison would give me a honest perspective and then some, like, oh, this is all messed up here or whatever. But from, being an incident commander or ops chief, whatever, I think for most of the time after she got in the Forest Service, I was either type 2 or type 1 incident commander. But I could get some honest feedback about, and of course, I didn't ever ask about the food, because we all know what happens when you ask about the fire camp food. But
I like it. So.
Well, I kind of do too. So that's another thing we're similar. But just in general. But we would talk, and and I didn't like do a 20 questions thing, but I would sometimes glean something from what she said, or whatever. And of course, I think I always felt the normal parent thing, like. And knowing more about the whole system, I was always kind of concerned about, okay, well, who's she working for on which division? And, because we all do
there's
that.
There's a difference. Yeah, there's a difference.
Yeah, so that was my perspective.
Yeah, we definitely don't have a no work talk policy. I don't really know what we would talk about if we had that policy. So
yeah, it's pretty central to who you are.
It's
really
both of our lives. And so I definitely, we've had our differences, and we continue to have our differences, at certain points, but it never causes any strife. And like I was actually going to say the same thing as her is, it gives a different perspective to both of us. Like, I'm frustrated from the ground, being on the ground and having these frustrations of what I think higher ups should be doing or what they're not doing. And then, she has the perspective of what is actually going on, whether it's fast or slow or whatever it might be, what the hangups are, or what what they're dealing with up above at that higher level is just different perspectives. Like she mentioned, I think it has been helpful for both of us to kind of pass on and affect change to a certain extent in both of our areas of expertise.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge thing, because just as you can kind of ground truth with Allison, Beth, what the decisions you're making from a policy level in your, current position or IC type decisions, I think it's hard sometimes to know when you're in that, on a crew type position, to understand the complexities that are happening in places like NMAC or at NWCG. Those complexities are so real, and there's so much stress trying to make the best decision literally for, the boots on the ground. So that's a pretty cool dynamic to have. Allison, would you say, I like I said, so many of us women in the business, this was, I've been in for a while now too, look at your mom as a mentor. And have you been able to appreciate that for yourself too, outside of just being your mom, being a mentor, but really her work, what she's done in her career? Because trying to carve out your own path, which is completely respectable, have you given yourself the opportunity to also, look at those attributes and see how she's fought to arrive at the top? A type 1 IC, the assistant director of operations that doesn't really get much higher than that in our world, right?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It definitely took me a while to make that full connection. I've always known, and been aware that, she works super hard and is super devoted to everything she does and has done for the agency and for IMTs and all sorts of different things, women too, or whatever. I'm kind of not really on that bandwagon so much, but yeah, I definitely, the last probably, I'd say maybe 10 years, but maybe even less than that, have fully appreciated, who she is and what she's accomplished, which is pretty substantial. You could talk to anybody in the Great Basin and they know who she is. Even though she doesn't know who lots of people are, I get asked all the time, "Oh, are you?" They'll see the name on the hard hat and I'm like, yep. And so it makes that connection. Granted, I still, and that's why I struggled, I think, for so long, is because of that name connection. It's like, oh, you're Beth Lund's daughter. If somebody didn't know me, I didn't want that perception. But then, at a certain point, you're just comfortable with yourself and who you are. And so then you don't even care anymore. So I am super proud that we share the same name and stuff. So it definitely took me a while, but super proud of everything she's done.
Would you say, Allison, that there's one attribute that your mom brings to the table professionally that is just something you really work to emulate?
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing that sticks out most for me is something that she's always said, that the reason she does what she does is to take care of the firefighters on the ground. And so I definitely have tried to make that a point of my focus, is to make sure that people are taken care of and steps are being followed, and and communications happening both from the bottom to the top and the top to the bottom, so that people know why they're there, what their objectives are, and that they are safe, and that's always been instilled from her to me for sure.
Beth, I'd throw it to you and ask the same question. As you've seen Allison grow up and evolve as a person and evolve as a fire leader, is there an attribute in her that you just are so proud of the way she's developing?
Absolutely. I mean, I can see myself in her to some extent, but she's also different. We're all different, and she's lived in a different era. And so it creates sometimes better, but always different opportunities. For example, I mean, in the 70s, you spoke when you were spoken to. You didn't ask questions, and it's kind of like put your head down and dig. And, and I thought, and everybody back then just took that as, it's just how it is. I mean, she's grown up in a different era where, you can have a voice, and you can, feel comfortable enough about, trying to point something out. And so, I'm definitely proud of her, and I definitely always was cognizant of respecting that concern, or I don't know if concern's the right word, because I didn't want her to be in the shadow, as it were, or something, because I've never had that opinion of myself. I mean, I'm kind of one of my favorite terms that I learned probably, I don't know, somewhere between 15, 20 years ago was, servant leader. And I mean, I think you need to be humble, always, because you never know it all, and sometimes you can learn something from a first-year firefighter that is poignant, and it's like, oh, I never looked at it like that, or I never thought about it like that, so you should always be open to other perspectives. But I've certainly learned a lot from her and from that generation, because they have been given the opportunity to be a little bit more educated. I mean, I think our training has improved. I remember when I took, we called it guard school back then or something. They always had weird words for it. It was, and learning about how to tell if there's a stump hole, if there's gnats there, that there's heat. And, some obscure things that the old timers would teach us. But I guess I don't know even why that popped up, but it always pops into my head about the gnats. But because it's not something that you teach in fire school nowadays, at least I don't think.
It should be.
So, but anyways, I've just been proud of her, and again, I always wanted to respect the position that she's in, and so I never tried to be overbearing. But in my own mind, like I said, I always had kept my eye on what crew she was on and who she's working for and stuff like that, just out of just being a mom, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Beth, I would also ask you, the roles you've played and the influence you've had in the entire, not just Forest Service, but the entire wildland fire program. As you are set to retire here soon, do you feel like you're leaving a better culture than the one you entered, a better culture for people like Allison or people who are brand new coming in? What do you feel about that, the culture that's there in just general?
Well, I'm a little sensitive about, am I leaving that? I feel
You've been a part of the evolution.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think there was a question I noticed, when you sent us just, generally what we were going to talk about. It talked about who your mentors were, or, and I definitely have some specific people. They were all men. But I just have not been keen on separating the male-female thing. Now, Obviously, it's there, but I feel like when I got into it, I could see immediately. And again, in the 70s, there was just when there was starting to be more women hired in fire positions, because there was a lot of concerns, and it's much like Allison said before, a few of the conversations I had when I was just a young firefighter and questions that males would ask were interesting, to say the least, from a lack of just understanding, physical differences. But I think my work ethic's always been, and I learned that from my mother, is you just need to work hard and do your best and always bring your best, to the game. And so I think that serves everybody well. But I, always been sensitive to ever having any kind of special treatment. And, when I started, the situation in fire camps and even PPE, we were still, 1976 was when we were just on the brink of switching to Nomex. So when I first went on fires, we were in jeans.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
Yeah. And, when you'd go to fire camps, the showers consisted of some garden hose and some tarps and some pallets. And, and not all of them, because I wasn't in I was in California, but, I'm sure there was some fancy ones, particularly in South Ops, but it was a lot more archaic than it certainly than it is now, because we've certainly developed a lot of vendors that have some sophisticated and good, as good as we can provide. But anyway,
well, I think the culture thing goes. I mean, I think it's beyond diversity. When I think of the culture and how it's evolved since I've been working, I think about, obviously, I'm the director of the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. We're about to have our 20-year anniversary, coming up next year. I think that has changed us a lot culturally to focus more on learning, back certainly when you started, because even when I started, it was different. We didn't look to learn from events. We just kind of moved forward, right? In a very different way. I think about the leadership curriculum. I referenced the supervision training where I first saw you, and now this leadership, because the leadership training, you probably, when you came in, Allison, we had that, didn't we? That was a part of your framework always.
Yep.
I think some of those things that have really pushed us differently culturally, and then certainly, as you say, Beth, the technology, that's been a pretty cool thing. And I think in those leadership positions that you have held, you have helped influence that. And I have to say, my previous job running a training center, you were always on cadres for us. And that's been super. That was awesome when we could get, a heavy hitter like, Beth Lund on our cadre. We always really appreciated that. So I think, I think you have to agree. You've left you have fingerprints all over the improved culture you're as you head into retirement, you have to feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had some great mentors. I've had some great female colleagues. When I was on the Reading Hotshots, myself and Sue were the first two women that had ever been on that crew.
Was that Sue Hasari?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And so that was, you speak of culture, and it was definitely culture shock for, I would say more so for those older male firefighters that had, started fighting fire in the late 50s, 60s, to get their heads wrapped around, seeing females. And so that's where some of the questions came in, that they were just concerned about. And another thing about culture, too, that you mentioned, Kelly, was I feel like I've watched the shift from safety and training to learning from unintended outcomes. And, I think the battlement fire, I remember studying that one. That was right, I think might have been a year before I started, 75 or 76, I can't remember, but, it was a fatality fire. And
that was in Colorado, just real close to where South Canyon.
Yes. And so, as I've seen the stuff like you do with the Lessons Learned Center and the learning culture and going, away from, safety and just pure like safety and then training, and you kind of merge both of those into, how do we incorporate learning from the lessons that we've learned. It's been fascinating to be able to watch that over the last several decades.
Yeah, a lot has definitely changed. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we talked about was this idea of the two generations and parenting a little bit, like, right? What's that like? How has that influenced you and your decisions, Allison? So I think it would be really fascinating to hear you, and I'm a mom in fire. I'd love to hear kind of some advice from you. What works well from a child's perspective, being a child of someone in fire. What are some things what's some advice you would give?
I don't know if I've thought about that ever. I don't know. I'm obvious. Well, not obviously, but I am not a parent and don't care to be. But I think that having a parent that's gone a lot is kind of hard, especially if you either don't have another parent and or your other parent isn't super parenty. It could be a little tough. So I just think that, but you still as a child want to be supportive, and that's how you're getting food and support is by that person working and being gone. And so I think just having fun when the parent is home and spending quality time with them is super important. I know a lot of times when I was a teenager, maybe I wasn't, I didn't spend as much quality time as maybe I could have. I was too busy doing other stuff, but I think, it's important to just recognize and appreciate and respect the sacrifices that person is making too, to support us as children.
Yeah. My son is now 15, and I think you've both met him. One of the things I started doing with him is when I would go, when he was pretty little, when I tried to recognize his sacrifice, because you guys know his dad was gone all the time. And so when I was going to go on a fire assignment or even just be gone for the day on something related, I would give him a cut. We'd called it his cut of overtime, so he'd get his cut. So he'd get 1 hour of my overtime, whether I was gone for 8 hours or 14 days, he would get his cut, 1 hour of overtime that when I got home, I would give it to him, take him to the store, and he could spend it absolutely however he wanted. Because I think you're so right on recognizing the sacrifice on both sides. Parents sacrifice a ton. Beth, you were gone a lot, but you made money. You were helping, a servant to the nation, right? Doing a lot of things that took you away from your kiddos. And Allison, you and Casey had to make a sacrifice and behave and not make it hard on your mom to be gone because it's the way it had to be. And I think that you're right on, that communication and that understanding of the sacrifice on both sides is so critical.
Well, and culturally, I guess it's not culturally, actually technology-wise back then, you couldn't just wait and get into service and make a call, right? You had to stand in that horrendous long line where people were fighting over, hey, you took more than your 2 minutes, and the proverbial long phone line, in fire camp. But I feel like it's been a big improvement, and we all know that we're not always in cell service, although we've come a long way with technology and cows, right?
Yeah.
Cell on wheels, and so I think that it was definitely a struggle in those days to not speak to your kids for several days, and then when you did, if something concerning was happening, it was really hard.
Although, I mean, it's almost kind of annoying how often we have service at this point, because I kind of like to live in ignorance and just work.
Totally. Yeah.
And when any family, you have young children and you've got to work, and particularly when you've got to be gone, like we just were talking about, it's tough. And I mean, some might say, well, it builds character.
Definitely. Yeah, it definitely does. But I would say that my mom is my best friend. And so it's definitely created like a strong relationship between us, because we have that commonality, and we can just be straight with each other and talk straight, whether it's mean or nice. Mostly mean sometimes, but in a loving way.
I'm kind of thinking I wouldn't want to be in the room when you two go at it, because it could be pretty entertaining.
Oh, yeah. Especially if there's a couple of beers involved. Being in fire is not for everybody. It's a kind of a hard life to live, especially if you do have family and children and stuff like that. But it's definitely rewarding. So I wouldn't try to persuade anybody not to do fire, but definitely recognize that it's not for everybody, and if it is a parent-child scenario, it can be an awesome relationship if you let it or are open to that.
Do you remember, is there a point in time where you started to, pick up on the conversations and think, my mom's a firefighter, that's something, and then thinking...
It was just day-to-day life. I mean, honestly, it's just been life since I can remember. That's just our life.
They probably learned to appreciate lightning storms, because we'd always get excited, at least as a firefighter, and Lowman would have a lot of thunderstorms, and then...
And all the trees were burnt down so we could see it really good.
Yeah, that's right. Because she would have been only 3 years old when the Lowman complex pretty much burned all the forest around Lowman. So, in that sense, it's a little bit sad that they didn't get to see that. But we've gone up there. We actually went up there a couple weeks ago, and there's little trees. They're coming back. I mean, probably the next generation will be able to enjoy them, but it definitely changed the landscape for sure.
Allison, we know that you're done at the end of this year,
yeah.
Right? The end of the calendar year, 46 years. You're going to get your last paycheck whenever it gets processed, right? And be moving on to the next chapter. Right. Allison, do you have advice for your mom? What do you hope for her, and what's your advice to her to enter that phase?
Well, it's something that we continually work on. Honestly, like I've mentioned, and she's mentioned, like this has been both of our lives, more so hers. I mean, almost half a century she's been working for the Forest Service in fire. And so that's kind of a huge deal and a huge transition. And so I think it's definitely going to take some work to be comfortable with that and transition out of that, because it's everything at this point. So I guess my advice, which we talk about quite often, is just chill out and have some fun, just relax, and enjoy the small things in life, and not have to always be worrying about something or waiting for the next stressor, just chill out and have a good time. And, my brother lives in Hawaii, and we can go visit him whenever we want and stuff. And I think she can do that a little more often and just travel. And, summers have been gone for 50 years. And so I think it'll just be cool to be able to chill out and just not be on NMAC calls 3 times a day.
Absolutely. I think that's awesome advice. And I hope you're listening, Beth, because you've earned it.
Well, yeah, it has actually been it's been harder for me than I ever anticipated, because it's 2/3 of your life basically, or 2/3 of my life at this point. So I didn't anticipate, as hard as it would be. But fortunately, I have my kids, especially Allison, being right here, and they're both very supportive, and so I think it'll be fine. It just has been a tougher transition than I had anticipated, for sure. But I'm not afraid of it, it's not like, well, what am I going to do? I have lots of things, I want to do, but it's just a big piece of your life, in any job really. But when you've spent this long at it, and as we all know, it's a little different with fire because you do get really close to your coworkers and
family.
Yeah, it's like a family, and it's just like your home at times. So, but no, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm proud of Allison, and just watched her have this realization when she switched jobs out of the hot shots. She got out of the hot shots and went right into a job that was not very operationally. I mean, it had something to do with operations, and so, seeing, those, we all learn those lessons, or, create those situations for ourselves to go, what was I thinking, but sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So I'm really glad that she's got this opportunity, stay in operations while your knees are still good. And
I'm actually kind of pissed off about that because, going back to her not being overbearing or telling me what I should or shouldn't do, I probably could have gone for hey, Al, are you sure you want to do that? Because I'm not really too sure that that's going to be right up your alley.
That's when you would want her to intervene.
Yeah. But she was super supportive of me making a transition. So anyways, let me make the choice, it was a difficult choice to get off the crew. That is my family and always will be. But she was there to support me throughout the whole thing. So I just wanted to touch back on that.
I actually take that, well, because I in hindsight's always 20/20, and I thought, well, I probably could have put a little bit more thought into this and gone. But Al's very headstrong, just like I am. I mean, that's how we all came up, right? You don't second guess yourself too much. So she went for it, and then she made adjustments and was patient about it, and decided that, it's probably a little too early to get out of the operations. And so sometimes I appreciate her saying that, because I do think that I might have been able to influence it a little bit more. Although I have to say,
she tried a little bit, but she's right. I was like, yeah, okay, well.
She's not one that takes advice well sometimes.
She gives you the old noted.
Yeah, copy that.
Yeah. Beth, what advice, would you give to Allison at this point in her career then? What's the general piece of good advice for someone in the middle of their career right now?
A couple things. I think she's certainly turned into a good leader, and I think she understands that servant leader piece, and I don't see a lot of advice needed in that realm. But I would say, go with your gut, like we do in fire, and don't stay too long. There's times now after 46 years where I'm like, because I obviously had to get out of fire in a sense when I turned 57, and that was 9 years ago. So I've stayed. I think maybe you could go 5 years beyond, getting the boot, but I don't know. I don't have any regrets really, but I feel like it might have been good to move on a couple of years ago, but in hindsight, it's all good. I'll get retired, and I don't think I'll be doing any AD-ing or anything like that. I think I'm just going to move on and, try to get a few more years out of this good life we have, and, do a little traveling and work on my house and stuff like that. So, but I would just tell Al to, she's learning lessons right and left. I mean, not right and left, but, the choices we make, and, I'm sure the next time she makes a position choice, just give it a little more thought. Not that she didn't, but I mean, it's a tough thing.
You definitely want to know what you're getting yourself into completely.
Yeah, and so, but I think no. I hope I know she's, I mean, and I've heard other people say this too with this business, sometimes you get into it when you're a temporary and, you think, well, I'll just do this while I'm working through college or for a couple years until I figure out what I want to be when I grow up, right, as it were. And next thing you know, you find yourself 10 years down the road going, well, I've invested all this, I've gained some qualifications, and then it becomes a bigger and bigger choice to make a mid-career shift into something else.
You just described me right there, like, oh yeah, this is great, and then
yeah,
suddenly
I'm not too sure I'll ever grow up, so we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I appreciate that advice, and I also know that I'll have you to bounce stuff off of when I need to. So yeah, I just hope that you are happy and healthy in retirement, Ma.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome. All right. I so appreciate the two of you taking the time to sit down. It's awesome to get in the studio where we can see each other and not be trying to do this over
I mean,
Teams.
I would much rather do this over beers or something.
I know, but it probably would have been quite a bit more colorful.
Yeah.
But I think it's been awesome, and Beth, I absolutely. It's been a privilege for me to spend so many years in the Great Basin, getting to work with you and Allison. I do remember when you used to be, like way before you were fighting fire, and it's pretty cool to see where you've gotten to and the legacy that you're building. I absolutely appreciate your time and
thank you. Thank you, Kelly, and thanks for letting us do this in person, because it is a lot better than it's just seems such an isolated situation when we try to do it over Teams or Zoom or something. But it's I appreciate you taking the time and being interested in our story. So
yeah, I think a lot of people will be. It's very cool, very cool. And I'll buy when we can rally somewhere. I'll buy.
All right.
Cool. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
A big thanks to Allison and Beth for sharing their story and unique experience. They offered such good lessons on a variety of thought-provoking and relevant topics such as leadership, identity, difficult decisions, and family. Storytelling is an important component to learning. Listening to each other's stories helps us grow personally and professionally. I hope you heard some nuggets that will resonate with you. For opportunities to further the dialogue about these and other topics, be sure to visit our blog at wildfirelessons.blog. Comments are always welcome. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you for listening to the Wildfire Lessons podcast. Be sure to subscribe, share, give us a review. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Wildfire Lessons. For more information, visit wildfirelessons.net. Music provided by second-generation smoke jumper Steve Baker, who always likes to keep one foot in the black. Thanks, Steve. Remember, we honor through learning.